Sean, it's always good, man. It's always good to
Yes.
see you.
Good
And
morning.
we were just chatting before we hit record. You're all over the place. So it's official. You are a resident of Nashville.
Yeah, south of that, Franklin, technically.
Franklin. Okay.
Yes. But yeah, excited and all over the place. Between Jamie's book and moving and our other businesses, I mean, and kids, summertime,
Yep.
camps, you know.
Dude, totally. Yeah. In fact, I was complaining with someone the other day, school wraps up. So we have high school graduation and then there's kind of like these end of year recital things for all the things, right? So my daughters are in dance and gymnastics. And so there's class parties. There's just, oh my goodness. I'm just like, you know what? Let's just get into summer already. Let's do this. So, but I follow you on Instagram, man. So I've been seeing you, making the move. The new house looks beautiful, super breathtaking view, man. I mean, I'm excited for you. And I'm excited for myself to be invited next time I'm in Nashville. So, and I just put that there publicly on the interwebs. So that way you can't back out. So
Every time you're out here, you got to come by. And that's what I'm telling everybody. This place is great. It was hard because we had our dream home at the time in California. We had a great spot there. Actually,
yeah,
we had a bunch of like farewell parties and different things the last month and a half. And every person that came was like, how can you leave this place? This is amazing. You know, and we're like,
yeah,
well, the place we're going is pretty good too. So
yeah, yeah. I was chatting with my wife last night and she said, we've always said that we would never move from where we are now. We
we said
love our
that too.
neighborhood so much. And we just, I don't know, we won't move. And and she asked the question last night. She says, okay, so we're up to 50 million. Still don't move. You know what I mean? I'm like, but then I was like, well, we'll just build another house somewhere else. You know what I mean? Like, and stay here. But for us right now, at least, is we just love our neighbors. We love our neighborhood so much that I would rip down my house and rebuild. That sounds more appealing and reckless financially, but that's just kind of how I feel about it right now. So, but neighborhoods change, people move out, and before you know it, like maybe we won't love our neighborhood anymore, and at that point we'll reconsider. So I don't know.
Yeah, we moved in there in California 7 years ago and said the exact same thing.
Yeah,
Up until the pandemic, it
yeah,
was, we were even up until probably like a year ago, even I thought we were going to raise all our kids in that home. So
yeah. It's weird, huh?
things do change. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Life changes. All right, man. Let's get into some questions. So I got questions from everywhere. I got questions from Ryan's Instagram at Ryan Mickler. I got questions from the Foundry as a backup, and I got Facebook questions. So if there's crappy questions, it's actually due to our fault selecting the poor ones. But we got some really good ones, man. So let's get into it. And let's take care of our Iron Council brothers first, and maybe address some of their top questions. If you don't know what the Iron Council is, or maybe you're new to the podcast, you can learn more about the Iron Council. That's our exclusive brotherhood. And you can learn more at orderofman.com/Iron Council. As in 2 days, the Iron Council membership will be open for enrollment, and it's going to be open for roughly about 2 weeks, and then it's closed. So if you're on the fence, execute now. You got 2 weeks to get in and join us. Otherwise, you're waiting until next quarter to join us in, 3.5 months from now. So once again, that's orderofman.com/Iron Council. All right. Our first question from Bobby. He says, what more can we do to help get this country back where it needs to be? He does allude to the fact that outside of our homes, I know it starts there first. So other than, hey, showing up strong in our homes as fathers and husbands, what else can we do to help kind of get things back on track?
I think then it creeps into your communities, starting with the stuff that you do with your kids. And if you don't have kids, then it's the stuff that you do, whether you're part of local clubs, maybe there's even if it's like a softball league or something that you do, and you have to be an example, just like you have to be in your home, right? If we're the patriarch in our home and we're that example, and it starts there, that patriarchy has to trickle out into our communities. And so we take leadership roles in our jobs, in our communities, and everything that we do. You know, there's kind of like this sense for most people that, in my opinion, seems bipolar, where they say you have to be someone, a certain type of person at your job. It always irks me when I hear this. You have to show up a certain way in your job, and then you show up a certain way in church, and then you show up a certain way at home. And even to hear guys say, and especially men, it kills me more with men for whatever reason, when they say, you know, when I drive into my driveway, I have to go into dad mode. And I'm like, how did dad mode, like, why does that change? You know, it's, if you're a leader in your home, and that leadership should trickle into your job, or if you're a leader in your job, that should trickle into your home. And so that for me should just be static. There shouldn't be a difference really. And I think our society, our culture has changed that. You know, I think this goes kind of hand in hand with the stuff that Ryan talks about when he talks about homeschooling. You know, when you're homeschooling, it is very static. There's no difference. And one of the things I know he doesn't like about the public school system is you're just indoctrinated with this bipolar sense of who you have to be. And they teach you from a young age that you have to be someone different in different roles. And that's just not true. I think you're doing it right when you can be the same person in all things, decide you're going to be a leader in those things, and then take that out into the world.
I love that, man. And I promise I was not looking at my phone for you guys watching on YouTube. I'm like looking down, playing. Well, I was looking at my phone, but it's for because I want to make a reference. I made this amazing post, by the way, on my Instagram. It was just, shocking.
Which is all of your posts.
Yeah. I mean, let's be frank.
Filled with wisdom.
but my wisdom was so great. I had to go reference it because you said something that, you know how it is, right? A lot of the posts that I actually put on Instagram are like, I'm running. And I'm like, oh man, like working stuff in my mind, and what I wrote was authenticity is the purest version of integrity. And then authenticity is what? An alignment of your personal self, your public self, and your spiritual self. So you're not having played this game, right? Like you're just you, and how you show up in the world is powerful, period. Right. And in all areas. So I really love that. And to your point, Sean, when I go to my daughter's, like my daughter graduated elementary school, or when I go to their little like 5K elementary race, and I go to those things, what's the percentage of guys at these things?
So small.
Dude, I'm like virtually the only guy. And let's be frank, and we're going to be a little maybe bold in this statement, guys. We are all riding the work excuse train to do things that we don't want to do. Well, I got to work. I can't. Bullshit. The reality of it is most of us dads can be to the recitals. We can go to the little graduations. We can go to the 5K things. We can go to the PTA. We can go to parent teacher conference. We can do these things. We just don't make it a priority. And I don't think we make it a priority because we don't think it's a big deal. But it is a big deal, especially when you start seeing a great deal and higher percentage of men showing up at these events and showing up in a very powerful way. So I think, to your point, Sean, it shows up in all those areas. And I think, and I'm a victim of this, where I think it's not important that I'm there. It's not going to make a difference. And it does. It really does. I think it does. And I think we need to get more present to how much of that kind of stuff makes a difference. The other thought that crosses my mind too, and I completely, full transparency here, ride my wife's coattails because she is amazing at this. I know all my neighbors really, really well. Every single one. We go out of our way and we do things all the time. I have fight night at my house. Usually the entire neighborhood's invited. We'll go watch movies in the circle in front of our house. Everyone in the neighborhood is invited. We know our neighbors. Now, was that convenient and easy to do? No, it's a pain in the ass. I don't want to get to know them. Maybe I don't even like them. I don't have the time for it. I don't have the energy. I don't want to, or whatever. But that's part of what we're talking about, is showing up powerfully and going out of our comfort zone and making sure that we're representing, you know what I mean? Even in our communities. Anything else you'd add to that, Sean, before we move on?
Just two thoughts as you said it. You know, anytime we say that we're too busy for anything, all that is a statement of your priorities. And that's the word you use, the priorities.
I like
and
that.
so it shows you the order of what's important to you. And then the second thing is, you know, as we moved in here, I have a list of 200 things that we need to do. And first on the list, outside of getting things ready for people that are coming to help us unload stuff today, is to drive around and meet all the neighbors, to meet everybody, the people that have the cows across the street, the people that have the goats across the other street, you know, the people that are building a house behind us. Like there's, you know, and we don't have a ton of neighbors, not like we're in a community, but it is a community. Right?
Yeah.
And anybody close at all I need to know who they are, for me personally. And I want to be able to help them in any way. I also want them to be able to help us in any way we can. Right. And so that's step one of being in this community, is, like you said, getting to know them, having at least a base relationship and knowing who they are.
Yeah, I like it, man. There is a question someone had in here. So, and it's perfect with what you just said. So let me jump to that question. So from Albert, he said, relocation networking tips. How are you planning on getting a leg up and finding the avenue to bring value to the new community? So anything that you'd add to what you just said?
This is perfect for me because I've been preparing for that. The first thing I did was just found, you know, they have the Facebook groups. And so in the community that we're moving into, I just joined a bunch of those groups in that community. One of them being the police department, which is actually really funny. The little town we're next to is called Nolansville, and their police department has like the best Facebook page I've ever seen, because they're constantly posting things like, you know, we arrested this knucklehead for this, or whatever. It's almost like Mayberry. So it's pretty funny, the stuff that they post. You know, it's not where I'm moving from. Where I grew up in LA, you know, it was a really bad neighborhood. And if that police department had to post stuff, it was LAPD, it was their busiest station in all of LAPD, is where I live near. And it would be a 1 week would be more than a year's worth of crime out here where I'm moving. Let's just say that, you know, and so it's just fun to see that. So knowing about that stuff, the reason I followed the police department is because you kind of get to know what's going on in the neighborhood, right? The local businesses that are here, I'm following some of them, the community members, seeing what they talk about, what they complain about, what those things. And so, and then figuring out what groups I would like to maybe show up to, be a part of. The reason I followed the police department is, you know, if there's anything that they're doing, I want to know about it, and I want to show up to those things, and I want to meet people, because most of the time, people that are going to be actively involved in, number one, taking leadership roles, caring about their communities, and wanting to serve those communities, typically are going to show up to those things. And so I want to show up to those things and meet those people. And so again, you just have to kind of insert yourself that way, figure out what you want to be involved in, and then show up. And then when you show up, be bold enough to introduce yourself, to meet, to discuss, to get to know them. Just like I just said about the neighbors, to know who those people are. And you want to know who they are, so you know how you could serve them, how they can serve you, and how together you can make your community better. So that's how I've been doing it, just using modern technology. And then as far as neighbors go, I'm just going to show up. You know, if there's anything, the biggest thing you need to do is just show up and start the conversations. And I think that's because it's awkward for people to do, that stops them from doing it, or they keep pushing it back. You just have to get uncomfortable and get out and do it and get in front of people.
Yeah. And if there's nothing to show up to, then you might have to be the one to plan it.
To start it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe go on those community things and say, hey, I would like to, I don't see this group anywhere. Let me know if it's out there, but if not, I'd like to start it. If you guys are interested, let's show up at this place.
Okay. Chris Davis, been dealing with a friend that has been struggling and being very negative. Tried helping, but it hasn't been working. How do you deal with people who are negative and dragging you down? Do you cut them loose? So I thought this was interesting. When I first read the question, I was like, hey, tips on helping someone struggling. And then the question kind of like, do you cut them? They're dragging me down, right? Because he's not quote unquote changing. So, so maybe if you don't mind, Chris, I know maybe that's not your question, but maybe some tips on helping. But also, how do you help without letting that person drag you down, and do you cut them loose ultimately?
I mean, like you said, it's kind of there's a dichotomy there, because having both, but for me, and I'll relate this to my business, because every day I spend more time trying to mentor and coach and help people with challenges that they're having in their life. And if you're in any leadership role, that's going to be the bulk of your time spent, is dealing with people's problems and issues. And what you have to do for their sake and yours is ask yourself the question in each interaction: is this serving me? And is this serving them? And if it's not serving both of you, there has to be a give and take. Meaning that if you tell somebody the same thing 10 times, it's kind of known in my leadership role in my business. People know that if they come to me for advice or help and I tell them and they don't do it, they're only going to have a couple more conversations like that with me. And so the same thing needs to be said for people in your life. Now, if it's like a spouse, or someone in your family that you're going to see every Thanksgiving, or you're going to, whatever it is that way, then it still has to come down to, do these conversations serve us? And then if not, maybe you need to have the conversation of, look, I've told you this multiple times, it's not happening, and it doesn't serve either one of us to continue having the same conversation. I care about you. I love you. I want to help you. I want to be able to serve you in a way that's productive, but you have to do work also. And so maybe you have that conversation if you haven't already. And then if you do, then, it has to get to the point, I think, where they won't come to you because they know better. But then simultaneously, just kind of keep an eye on them. And when we say cut people out, I don't think that means completely ignore them. I think it means still keep tabs to make sure they're okay, if that makes sense. And then if you feel like it's getting dark, or you hear from somebody, as from other people, then maybe you reach out and you try and help and serve them in that way. But off the top of my head, that's what I have. What do you got on this?
No, I mean, I feel the same way about the cut them loose kind of thing. I feel like, let's break this down. Why would a negative person drag you down? Because you have expectations that Sean should be a certain way. And if Sean's not that way, then it makes me frustrated. And I think he should change, and he's not whole and complete the way he is. And if he doesn't change, then it makes me frustrated. And so I like to ignore him. Like, I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right? So it's interesting, because I don't know, like the reality of it is, no one's ever going to change, because people change because they choose to, right? Because they got committed to an idea and they've take that on themselves. And that's part of the transition, right? And that's usually why someone would come to you, Sean, saying, hey, I want advice, right? And then they're like, okay, I'm going to take what you gave me. I'm going to hold on to that, and I'm going to evolve and change, right? But if we get too, we got to just watch our expectations on what we put on people and the way they should or should not be, and kind of let that go a little bit. And now, if someone's constantly around you and they're just negative, well, then back to your point, you have to ask yourself, how is that serving you? And for me, I don't think it's quote unquote cut them loose. I'm just not going to make that a priority, that relationship, right? I'm not going to invest more energy in that relationship if it's not serving me well. Now, do I have to like write them a letter and say, I'm breaking up with you and I don't like you? You know what I mean? It's like, no, I'm just not going to invest energy in them. That's all. But am I going to stay on the path of showing up powerfully in my life and be there for when that person says, hey, you know what, Kip, I have a question, or I see something in you and I, I'm curious to your insights. Am I going to be like, no, I'm not going to talk to you because you may not. No. What am I out sharing an idea? But when I share the idea, I have to be very careful, not that me sharing the idea doesn't come with some expectations of how someone should show up in the world. That's up for them to decide. And think of, sometimes I think of it as like it's good practice. Are they going to listen to me? I don't know, but this is good practice, right? Like how can I deliver this idea? And is it precise? And okay, that was, and it helps me. I don't know about you, Sean. It's just like this podcast. When we talk about certain things, it helps me rise up, whether you guys listening to the podcast right now benefit or not. I was edified. So I'm good to go. I don't need you all to listen to us and go, oh, my world has changed because of what Sean and Kip said. Actually, I'm changed because of the conversation. And then we create the opportunity for you to take that on for yourself. And that's up to you to do that. So I don't know, maybe I have a little more of a foo-foo feel for it, but I don't think we have to cut people loose. I think we need to watch our expectations and let them be them and figure things out on their own path, and maybe that's found in also having some empathy because I mean, it's, when I think of someone making a lot of bad decisions and they're overly negative, the way I get past judgment of them is having empathy of the struggle that they're in and how difficult they're making life for themselves. And I don't like pander them, but I actually have empathy. I'm like, man, that's tough. And I honestly hope that they figure it out. So then that way they can get on the path, but it is their choice.
As you say that, I had this thought that you have to be careful how you navigate that, because if you're just going to be an ear for them and empathic for them, there's
you might enable
between that and helping them, right? And so,
yeah.
As you said that, I thought of those covert contracts that we sometimes have, that those expectations. So if your expectation is that you listen to them and kind of have a pity party, but you never set an expectation for what the goal of the conversation is, then it's going to continue happening that way. And so maybe you ask, hey, are you calling me? Are you asking me for advice because you want help or you want somebody to listen? And so sometimes we need to ask those questions of people of, do you just want me to listen, and be here to be an ear for you to talk to, or do you want advice and help? Because there's a drastic difference in the conversation. And so if it's just for an ear, I mean, I'm not going to lend much time to that. And then if it's for help, I'm going to lend a few times for that. And so I think it's making that clear will cause less frustration for both of you. And then the second thing is, if it is just for an ear, for me, I also have to make it clear, like, okay, I'll listen, a couple of times, but if you want me to consistently listen, there's only 4 people that call me dad, and there's nobody that calls me mom. And so if you're looking for that, like maybe there's someone else you need to call. And if it's not your mom or your dad or somebody whose, job it is to listen to you that way, maybe there's therapy, that needs to happen. Not in a negative way. I think people have a negative connotation of what therapy is, but
I know,
kind of give to that and lean to that, because again, it's just listening, or just even worse, feeding it and having that pity party. Too many people do that. It's like I think I see this. I was going to say, I think I see it in women more than men, but I actually don't see it in women more than men. Men do it. It's just different, where we call our guy friends, or we call our, women call their girlfriends and they call the ones that they know are going to be on their side.
Totally. Yeah. That's not
Right.
going to push back and make them feel bad about what they feel.
Yeah. So you can't be passive aggressive with it. You can't just agree with them and whatever, and then be mad that they called you. Right. So be careful how you navigate that as well.
Copy. All right. We got the high achiever, Jarrett. Is it Jarrett? My apologies if I pronounced this wrong, but Storl from Bruiser. He says, when you get to the point in your life that you have exceeded every goal you have set currently, what's next? What is the best way to set the next level? What steps in planning your next battle plan would you suggest? So Jarrett's killing it. And he's kind of like, I don't know what to take on next. Ideas there.
Well, one of my favorite quotes is from Lou Holtz. He says, if you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And he may not have been the first guy to say it, but he's the first guy I heard say it.
Yeah.
And
Sean, let me really quick. Can you relate to Jarrett on this question?
Oh my gosh. You have no idea. Well, that's why I joined the IC.
I always feel like I always have something that could be better or I'm working on. So I can't relate to like, I feel content, like what to take on next. I never feel content. So this is interesting. Anyhow, go ahead. Sorry.
Well, then in that sense, I can and I can't relate. Okay. I'm the same way. I'm always not content, kind of that blissful, my friend Ed calls it blissful dissatisfaction.
Yeah.
Of just
it's not good enough.
I'm super grateful, love everything I have, all the great things that I have in my life, but simultaneously want more.
Yeah.
Know there's different levels, want to be more, be better, continue pushing myself. But there's a difference in doing it and it kind of being a habit of just looking for the next thing or wanting more, pushing for more, and being passionate about that next thing.
Got it.
There's a vast difference. And so I have been in a place where I almost felt like I plateaued. And so I'm still pushing, still have goals, still have things I'm reaching for, but it doesn't like stir my soul. It's just what I do. And so I think the difference in that, and that's what I was about to say, is why I joined the IC to begin with, because I reached a plateau in my life where I felt stagnant.
Yeah. Like what's next? Yeah.
I was still growing. I was still improving in different things, but I didn't feel fired up to the point where it's like I leapt out of bed in the morning to want to go seize the day. And so that bothers me because I've had that through so much of my life. And so when you don't feel that, it's maybe not always totally obvious because again, if you're hitting goals, and I think that's where it sounds he's at, where he's hitting goals, he's super excited about them. Now he's hit those goals. And one of the things that happens to us when we have goals, especially if they're fiscal or they're temporal or they're, things we're trying to achieve, like a house or an income level or a thing, a promotion at your job or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You think it's going to be this unbelievably, life-changing
expectation.
Feeling yeah. Like winning an Academy Award. But then you get there and you realize you're there and you're a little different person. And now what? And you're just, it doesn't really change much like you think it's going to when you achieve that level. And so you have to continue to push yourself. And so for me, fortunately, I was able to notice that feeling and then wanted to do something about it, started looking for more. I don't know if it was podcasts or just the radar was up for what can I get fired up about? And then I saw something of someone that I follow with Ryan, and it made me think, oh, I'll check this guy out, and started listening to the podcast. I'm like, wow, I'm so in tune with what he's talking about. And then listening to the AMA with you and him. And I'm like, man, these guys, the way they answer, I'm in tune with that. I love this. And maybe there's a few things like I'd love to be able to chime in. Right?
Yeah.
And,
Totally.
and then I'm like, I'm going to join the IC because it's something different. Okay. Now, in saying that, I had great mentors, great coaches. Like, I'm pretty sure you know who Ed Milet is, right? So Ed's one of my personal mentors. I've been in business with him for almost 24 years now, right? So it's been over 23 years that I've been able to work with him. And so a very high level business coach, life coach, I mean, whatever you want to call it, I've had one of the best in the world, and you can still plateau. You can still have that feeling.
Totally.
So I just needed it to be different. And then, so getting into the IC, what it did for me was show me that different way, introduce me to the battle plan. Even the way I made goals was different than how I did them before. And it got me fired up for now and each day and each quarter, and the things that I want to do in the different quadrants to improve myself. And now I'm jumping out of bed again and I'm ready to do it. And then simultaneously, we were already growing, but it was like the difference between like putting your money in a savings account at the bank and investing in the stock market long-term, right?
Yeah.
Where you maybe get a little more ups and downs, but long-term, you're going to earn way more, right? It's kind of that upward spike, or in the growth stage of a business. That's how I feel now in my life. But it was searching for that. It was finding that and making sure that the goals I was putting down were firing me up. And then one step back from that is making sure that you have a next goal to begin with. And the number one biggest mistake that I see people make in their lives in general is that they don't have goals. And then when they make goals and they achieve them, they don't make the next one. And so that needs to become your habit. Until that's your habit, you're going to consistently feel stale.
Yeah.
And so it's, like for you, that's your habit at this point in your life. It's what's the next thing? You have it in front of you. You're actively and excitedly engaged in pursuing that thing. And as you get close, if you're like me, and I'm just making this assumption, but I think this is most high achievers, even before you hit it, as you're creeping close to having or achieving that thing, you've already thought of the next one. You're already thinking of what's next.
For sure.
Right. And
for
so
sure.
maybe you need to find a place that just shakes it up for you. That's probably why you joined the IC, right? And so it's especially if the IC is the thing that's helped him, it's reaching out to other mentors, reaching out to people in the areas of his life that he wants to improve even more, whatever it is, just really contemplate what that next thing is. And go after it.
And I think it reiterates the importance of us having a vision, giving some thought to what is that 5-year goal. I mean, one thing that you kind of alluded to it, Sean, and I've shared this story probably already too many times, but I was chatting with my wife when I was reading what's the book? Or the 12-week year, right? And I was like, hey, honey, what's like ideal perfect state, 7, 10 years, 15 years from now? And as she explained it, I was like, that has nothing to do with money. Everything you just said is freedom of time, because she was like, oh, I want to be able to go to Europe for a month whenever we want. Well, don't get me wrong, there's a money element to that, right? But I was like, oh, well, that's flexibility. Mm-hmm. Well, that's a different avenue than just making more money, right? And I do feel like a lot of us have a tendency to just chase that money train, thinking that's going to be fulfillment and satisfaction of life. Yeah. And it won't. Otherwise, you're going to be heads down and great. You'll make 5 million, but you'll be miserable. So,
or not have spent any quality time with the people that are important to you.
Yeah, totally. So I think alignment around vision is critical. And then the only other thing I'd add that I think was advice that given to me years and years ago was everyone has problems. Everyone. It's like time. It's like at one point in my life, I went to college full time and I worked full time until I graduated. So my day was pretty much 6 a.m. to about 3 p.m. And then I'd go to university from about 4 to 10. I have no idea how I pulled that off. In fact, I don't even remember how I did homework. But I do remember, like, I'm ahead in this class, so I'm going to sleep in this class, or I'm going to like work on the homework in this class during this class. Like, it was just strategically pulling it off. But my point is if you would have asked me back then, it's like, hey, what if you just had a job? I'd be like, oh man, I'd had so much time. Well, guess what happened once I just had a job? I had no time. And then, people that retired and they're busy and they have no time, and no one has time. And I think problems and time are that way. They fill in the gap that we have. Everyone has problems. Even the person with no problems has drama and problems. And so you might as well be intentional and choose your own problems. And I really feel, and it's a play on words a little bit, Jared, so bear with me, but what problem do you want to take on? Be intentional with your problem. What's something that fires you up, that gets you pissed off, or you don't like the way it is? Make it your problem. Take it on. There you go. Now you're fired up. Now you're working towards something that you're passionate about. And maybe that's the next thing, is you finding a problem to tackle. Maybe it's no longer about my financial situation. Maybe it's no longer, the marriage is going good. And I'm not saying you neglect these things because they're going well, right? We have to maintain, but maybe all those things are tackled. Maybe it's time to start tackling something in the community, right? Something in outside of yourself, outside the family, that you can take on and be passionate about.
That was awesome. One last thought on that, as you were talking, when you brought up the money part. I had this thought last night as I just got to our new place with the moving van, driving from California. It was my daughter and I drove across the country with our 2 dogs and her cat.
It was a cat crazy in the car?
No, he was actually great.
Oh, really? Oh, dude. I've helped
someone.
I've had someone move with a cat, and their cats are like losing their minds. Yeah.
That's what we thought. That's what we thought. We had the carrier and everything just in case. And he was actually fantastic. We scored.
Okay.
But getting here, and I'm like, all right, after we're done and settled, I just went out in the pool and was decompressing, and I'm sitting out there, and we have a fishing pond on our property, right? And I'm overlooking the pond, and it's the after sunset, and the fireflies start coming out, right? And they,
awesome.
And they start popping and everything, and I'm just sitting there, and I'm thinking of, like, this thought came to my mind of, I just want to be in a situation where, my sons and I are down at the pond, and, after sunset, and this starts happening, and we can just sit and kind of enjoy our time together after fishing. I had that thought, and I don't want to sound cheesy or cliche, but it stirred my soul to have that moment, to be in that moment. And so, buying this property in the first place was a means to that end. But when you have those feelings, kind of like that what if feeling, what if I could put myself in a situation where we have this moment? I think it's important that we acknowledge those things and write them down. And then maybe that's your next thing you push towards, whatever that means. And I think it's a combination of what you said, financially, time availability, however you need to place yourself in a position to be able to achieve that thing. When we have those what if feelings, that we capture those, we write them down, we notice them, because my opinion is that's the spirit basically pushing you and leading you towards things that are going to serve you the best in your life. And so make sure that you capture those moments and then write those down. It could be something like that. It doesn't always have to be a physical goal or a money achievement or even a time freedom achievement. To just say, I want to have total control of my time, that's different than what I just explained, right? To have that moment where I can, appreciate all of what we've, the accumulation of, the 23 years when you mentioned when you were in school and you don't know how you did it. That was when I started my business 23 years ago, and I was homeless and sleeping in my car, and still I had one suit that I wore all the time, every day. And, people probably knew that and noticed. And I don't know why they listened to me. I don't know why they still did business with me. I don't know why they still followed me, or listened to my leadership. And I was such a mess compared to who I am today. I don't know how I did it either, but I was just so focused on the what ifs that the rest worked itself out in my self-improvement toward achieving that end. And so when I was in that situation where I was sleeping in my car, I would think of that future life that I wanted with my kids that I didn't have currently.
Yeah.
And those what ifs pushed me and created the opportunities for me to have those things, more so than writing down the income goals and all that stuff. Not like that it isn't important, but those things that stir your soul, I think are totally mandatory.
Your what ifs. So I have a kind of a mantra that I read in my journal. It's kind of like my ethos, but it's more of this, like, I don't know, if Jocko read it, it fired me up maybe even a little bit more, but it's kind of like I read it and I'm like, yeah, and I changed it 6 months ago and I added a line item in there and I wrote, give your marriage a chance to be amazing. And it's kind of, well, what if, right? And it, in your statement just kind of got me thinking, it's like how often we place labels and it's this way versus a what if kind of is like it's the possibility of something without it being hardened. Does it make sense? Without a hardened expectation, but it's the possibility of something great. And I don't know. I don't know why I shared that. There's power in not placing things in buckets, not having too hard of expectations on things, but really just dreaming of possibility and allowing things to stay open to be great, whether it's your marriage or relationship with your, or the what if of like, oh man, what if we could have this place in Tennessee and have a pond and we create this environment like that's dreaming, and not dreaming in a negative sense, right? But I don't know. I'm not sure what I'm saying. I'm talking circles now, but
no, you're not. That's important. And the reason it's important is because that is what pushes you to be better.
Yeah.
It for you, you're doing it right if you can't quite articulate it well. And I think that's the feeling you're having right now. Because you can't articulate it well in your mind, it means it's magnificent. And you can't put words that can quite explain the magnificence of that feeling. And that pushes you to constantly and consistently be better.
Yeah.
And that's the feeling we all need to have. And it's the guys who kind of push that aside, like, oh, that's just crap. That's like, that's feel good, happy, hippie crap, or whatever they, how a lot of guys say that. Oh, you don't need that. And, but we do, and if you want magnificence in your life, you need to push to that feeling.
All right, Brian Chauvin, information is thrown at us from thousands of sources. How do you vet the source to gauge its credibility?
Well, he's maybe not going to like this answer, but it sounds like he's spending too much time
trying to figure out the answer.
Yeah, trying to figure out the answer and trying to figure out what's messing up the world around him. And now I'm making an assumption, maybe he's not coming from that place, but this question gets asked by most people from that place.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
And all it does is it stops you from progress.
Yeah.
And so,
I got the quick answer for you.
Yeah.
None of them. What's truth, right? Like one of my favorite books of all time, the book, I'm bad at authors, the author of The Four Agreements. He wrote a book called The Fifth Agreement. Ruiz.
It's like 3 names, right? 4 names.
We'll look it up here, guys.
I'll pull it up while you're going.
But the Fifth Agreement is to be a skeptic, I believe, but listen. And it's really what that has to do with is don't like don't believe yourself and don't believe anybody else unconditionally, right? Like be mindful and doubt everything and understand where it's rooted in or what's the intent behind what's being shared. Does that make
Don
sense?
Miguel Ruiz.
Luis, yeah. And so the idea is like, there is no truth. There's perception. I mean, I shouldn't say there's no truth. Everyone's going to lose their shit just because I just said that. All right. So, but most things that people say or communicate has intent behind it and context and a story, even a story, right? Someone comes to you about, I mean, we had the example earlier, like some guy, has someone that's overly negative. Well, are you listening to his negative story? Or are you trying to understand where he's coming from? Like, what's the intent? Well, really what the intent is, Sean, is I want validation, man. I'm telling you how shitty my life is because I want you to feel sorry for me because I feel so low about myself that I'm seeking some form of validation that I'm worth it in this world. But I'm not a piece of shit. That's really what I want to hear. So I'm going to tell you my sob story so you feel sorry for me. And then you can like, oh man, you can rise above this or give me something because my self-esteem is so bad. That's the real listening, right? And then the other thing, when we look at news and politics, the reality of it is it's not so simple. Nothing is so simple as a 30-second or 1 minute news clip or 255 characters in a tweet. It is not that simple, but yet we judge like there is no tomorrow, right? Oh, this incompetent person, this, them, they should not do this. Do you really know? Do you? Oh, no. You don't know shit. You didn't do the research. Oh, you only read a paragraph from someone else's regurgitated information. And half the knowledge that we have in this world, we're just regurgitating what we memorized that we got from someone else. Like we're not experts. Until you're the expert, it's more complex than you realize. And I just, that's how I approach everything. So I'm a skeptic, like there is no tomorrow. I don't care about political parties or anything. Someone runs something, I'm like, yeah, it's not that simple. Oh, we should invade and fight for Ukraine. Well, it's not so simple. What's going on? What are these nuances? Have you ever thought of this? Like I'll stop sharing after this. Someone's like, oh, they need to fight. Oh, man, do they? Like, just imagine, and I've never thought of that until this Ukraine thing. Imagine that our neighboring country, Canada, so America is, let's say, half of America is Canadian, even though they're in America, and Canada has some stories about why they're coming in. They're not saying that they're trying to kill us, and they're coming through your neighborhood. They're not attacking you. They're not shooting you. But there's a tank or a convoy coming down your road. Do you grab your gun and shoot them and put your entire family at risk and have them blow up your home? Or do you hang out in your home and let them just drive on by? Those are tough questions, super tough questions. And I think it is super easy for us to all sit back and go, oh, this is what they should do. But we're being naive and ignorant in regards to really putting ourselves in other people's decisions and situations that we think it's going to be an easy answer. And it's not. It's way more complex. And we just go around seeking validation that we know we have our shit together because we're too lazy to actually have some critical thinking. All right, I'm done.
Yeah, that's so good. Let me add this thought. Let me ask you this. I'll have you answer it just so everybody can kind of hear it this way. But if you want to, in LA, there's this neighborhood up by the Getty Center. And the Getty Center overlooks all of LA, and you can see the ocean and the beach and all the stuff. It's a pretty magnificent view when you can see through the smog. And so there's a neighborhood right up there, and I forget the name of the neighborhood, but it's one of the most exclusive neighborhoods in the world. I mean, you're talking about multi-million dollar,
just
10,
beautiful
20, $30
homes,
million homes, a private golf course. It's unbelievable. But it used to be a dump. So there's this big road that goes up to it that's giant, it's super wide because it used to have to accommodate dump trucks and, earth movers and stuff like that. And so I used to wonder why that road was so wide. It made no sense. Why is this giant road going up into this private neighborhood? But that's why, because it used to be the city dump. And so how do you turn a city dump into, let's call it a city park or a beautiful neighborhood or into something different? Like, what do you have to do first? And not just first, what do you have to keep doing? And I'm asking you this question, Kif. Let's see if you get it. First off, like, what do you got to do to turn the dump into something beautiful?
I mean, I think that I don't know, man. The pressure's killed me here, Sean. I don't want to.
Like, where would you start? Where would you start? And I'll give you this hint. You'd have to start somewhere. Where would you start? And then where you started, it would have to stay that way inevitably.
I mean, I think. I mean, obviously the dream and the idea, right, it has to be present first. But I think the first thing is to create the perception or the value of it, right? Like, I think, like, you can never take the dump and communicate it as the dump and then sell it to someone and say, hey, you know what, you should build a $30 million home on this thing. It's going to be great and amazing, right? Like, I think you have to have the dream of it, but then you have to, like, create that greatness and have momentum around it to make something amazing like that.
Okay. And then after you have that thought, now let's think of planning and implementing. What's step one?
You have to stop dumping trash on it.
Yes. Stop the trucks.
Yeah.
Right?
Stop the truck and stop making a dump. Yeah.
Stop the trucks. Okay.
Yeah.
That's my whole message is stop the trucks. Because here's the thing. If trash keeps coming in, it doesn't matter what you build.
Still a dump.
It doesn't matter how good your vision is. It doesn't matter your thought. It doesn't matter the buy-in. None of it matters if trucks are still showing up with trash. And then you could build it and it could be magnificent. And if later trucks start showing up again, this great neighborhood becomes trash. And so our brain is exactly the same thing. And so, for you, maybe you just need to stop the trash indefinitely. Instead of trying to vet the trash, instead of sifting through the trash, just stop the trash. And I think most people are better off just cutting off. And I don't care what it is. If you prefer listening to CNN or Fox News or whatever that stuff, you mentioned the intention. Their intention is to sell ads. And so the biggest way they're going to get that, the way they're going to get the most eyes is pissing people off. And so if they could get you more pissed off, right, what that means is that you're going to be more pissed off. That doesn't serve you. That's trash, in my opinion. And so I'm not going to listen to it. I'm not going to allow any of it in my brain. I'll leave with this thought. Coming across the country, I listened to every podcast I could listen to. I listened to books. I started listening to comedians, and I found this guy, and I was dying laughing, listening to all these different comedians. I was cracking up. I just randomly, it came up as like a recommendation, and I was dying. He made this, it was in 2018. He had this Netflix special, and it was hilarious. And then I'm like, I got to listen to something else from this guy. That was awesome. And so he had a new one in 2022. And I'm like, oh, new stuff. This is going to be so good. I'm so excited. And I listened to it and it sucked. And the reason it sucked and it was awkward is because in 2018, he said what he felt and it was funny. And he didn't care if he offended people. And it was for both sides, if you want to call it that, left, right, and whatever. He was making fun of at that time, 18, or maybe it was 19. It was Trump was in office, right? And so he was making fun of Trump. He was making fun of Obama. He was making fun of like just everything. And it was hilarious. I was dying, right? And then 2022, the new one, he got woke, right? Is for lack of a better word. And he was trying to be very left leaning and not offend. And you could tell the way he was wording stuff, and he was walking more on eggshells, and it sucked. Yeah. And so it was funny for me. I stopped listening. So I didn't want that in my brain, even something like that, even though it was a comedy routine, because he was trying to basically almost like indoctrinate you and with a theology instead of just be funny is how I felt. I stopped listening.
Because the intent changed.
Yes. And you could, and it was obvious. And so you have to be aware. For me, I think it's more important that your radar is up, and the way that you vet it is if it doesn't serve you, again, back to serving you and your family. If it's not going to make you better, it's not going to push you, to improve your life and the life of your family and your community and your business or whatever the important things are to you in your life, then it's trash.
Yeah.
Get rid of all the trash.
Quote of the day. I'm thinking t-shirt, man. I'm thinking stop the trucks, just the stop the trucks. That's the next t-shirt. Stop the trucks. All right. Keith Reeves. Kind of quick, fun question. EDC, your everyday carry. What are you doing there?
Well, I lived in California, so you can't carry nothing, right?
He's carrying a pin.
Yeah. But what's next to my bed is, I have a P220 Elite 6-hour 45.
Yeah. Oh, that's big. All right. 365 P365, the XL. That's my, it's a beaut. That's it. All right. Moving on. Simple question. See, I'm just banging out questions here. All right. JRB. I think we're hopping in some Instagram names here. What advice can you give those who feel powerless to change your life for the better despite searching faith and temporal solutions? How does one see the forest through the trees when it feels like there is a ton of shit in your way and no hope of getting through it or that hump to the next level?
I would tell you that if it sucks, you're most likely on track. And one mantra that I adopted a long time ago is that the harder it gets, the closer you are to greatness. Because I think the adversary works his hardest when he's close to breaking you. And so it's when he's close to getting you to give in, to give up, to settle, for lack of a better word. One of my least favorite words in the dictionary is the word settle. And I think that's what happens is we give up on being better or whatever it is. I mean, sometimes people just give up on keeping on. And that's for me when I push even harder. Now, it doesn't mean it's not still going to suck. And it might suck for a little while still. But in the question, he mentioned giving up hope. That's where you lose. So as long as you don't give up hope, as long as you know what you're pushing for, and as long as you believe, which you should, that greatness is in store for you, because it's in store for every single one of us, these souls, if we're created in the image of our Father in heaven, then anything's possible for us. And so we have to remind ourselves of that and keep pushing. The darker it gets, the closer we are. It's in the book Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill. There's a part of one of the chapters he calls 3 feet from gold. And he tells the story of a guy who moved west and he bought this gold mine that was not successful. And he didn't buy it for the mine. He bought it for the land because it was next to a river and it was beautiful and it was a great piece of land. He thought he'd live and retire there and just have a simple life. And he lived there for a couple of years and got bored. And so he decided, you know what, I'm going to start digging where they left off just for fun. And 3 feet in, he tapped into one of the largest veins of gold that the US has ever seen. And so
3 feet.
3 feet. So the guy who sold it was devastated. And now the nice part of the story is you think, man, that guy who sold it, what did he do? Did he want to kill himself? Did he, right? He used that as motivation to actually, then he got into selling life insurance and became one of the top 100 best sellers of life insurance in the country and became a multimillionaire doing that. And so he still made his dreams come true. He still became very wealthy and everything else, but he used that story, from his own life of being 3 feet from gold to fire him up for the next thing and not give up next time, keep pushing. Totally. And so I always attach to that 3 feet from gold story every time it sucked for me, and it's always going to do that. This move has sucked. This has been one of the worst things that's happened to me in my life, but it's just one of those things. Just push through, just get through it, just do it. It's going to be awesome on the back end, but you have these thoughts of, is this worth it? Is it, should you really be doing this? Is this going to, It's the last thought on this. Adversary's number one tool he has is doubt. It's a simple thing, but if he could get us to doubt any part of our lives, that's where he wins. And so we have to cut out that doubt, keep our heads down, keep pushing forward. You know, I don't know if that's valuable or not.
I think it is. Well, and I think, I mean, here's, and just some maybe hack. I wouldn't say this is in counter to what you're saying. It's just, sometimes it's hard, right? Like, I'm doing my thing, Sean, and I'm starting to feel hopeless, but I'm staying on the path and I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, right? And so let me give some thoughts here. One, and I use the analogy of money for this. I remember, so I'm a son of a farmer. And I remember I learned how much my dad made. And my dad was a butcher, a farmer, and worked in a coal mine. And I saw his check once when I was in high school. And I did my, high school math. And I calculated that he probably roughly brought home around 40K. So my goal was, by the time I graduate college, if I'm making 40K, I'm killing it.
Yeah.
Right out of college, I'll be only like 22, 23, and I'm making the same as my old man. I for sure thought life would be set at 40. Now, as everyone knows, I made 40 and I felt poor. And then I thought, oh man, if I could only make 60 or 80, then I'd be solid. 80 and 60 felt a whole hell of a lot like 40. You know what I mean? Like, the point is I thought the light at the end of the tunnel was how much money and changing my circumstance. The light at the end of the tunnel was enjoying the ride and being present to the kind of man I was showing up in spite of my circumstances. That's the light. And so try not to get like, oh, I need my life a certain way for me to enjoy life, man, because it's not going to happen. And this came to mind. There's a quote by Gordon B. Hinckley. You probably already know which one I'm thinking. So, anyone who imagines that bliss is normal is going to waste a lot of time running around shouting that he's been robbed. Most putts don't drop. Most beef is tough. Most children grow up just to be people. Most successful marriages require a high degree of mutual tolerance. Most jobs are more often dull than otherwise. Life is like an old-time rail journey. Delays, sidetracks, smoke, dust, cinders, and jolts. Interspersed only occasionally by beautiful vistas and thrilling bursts of speed. The trick is to thank the Lord for letting you have the ride. And I think there's honor in just knowing that in spite of how difficult life is right now, that you were consistent, that you are a man of honor, that you kept your integrity intact. That is powerful. Who gives a shit what the circumstances are, right? I mean, you think all the greats, right? And you fill that blank in whoever you want. And I'll use the simple ones, right? Like ones that we can all relate to at least. You look at Goggins. What makes Goggins Goggins? His shitty circumstances is what made Goggins Goggins.
And him embracing it.
Yeah. He wouldn't have been the amazing person he is if he didn't have a horrible circumstances.
Yeah.
Right. And so, man, just focus on who you're becoming and find power in that. There's the hack or the thought, I guess.
That's I love that quote.
Yeah.
Good grab.
All right. Kilton Dillon, maybe a last question, if that's okay with you, man.
Yep.
All right. Kilton Dillon, over the last year, I've been on a journey of personal development, part of which has led me to Order of Man. Welcome, by the way. I can see some of the same stresses I was facing in my wife. Oh, I see some of the same stresses I was facing in my wife now. How can I help inspire her to start on that journey herself? So how do I help? And I like, Kilton, that you said inspire her, not change her, or you know what I mean? So
make her. That's what most guys say.
Yeah, make her. That's true. So you're choosing the right verbiage at least. So tips for Kilton on how does he inspire his wife?
I think first it's having the conversation of what she wants and make sure you guys are on the same page.
Yeah.
I mean, my wife and I have always done it that way, mainly. And I literally have people that complain about it when I give advice on this stuff, because they're like, oh, you guys were different. You had a
My
different.
wife's not the same way.
Yeah, yeah. And
Yeah.
we were different because we met in our business, and we both independently were doing well and had our own goals.
Yeah.
And
I
we're
see.
we're focused on personal development and growing and becoming better. And so we did that independently already. And then as we started dating,
It was just
we just
alignment.
incorporated that together. Okay,
Got
what
it.
do we want now, right? And
Yeah.
pushing for those things. But regardless, it's, if you were both independently doing that or not, that needs to be happening for both of you. Now, at first, you're going to be doing it more than her, but you have to find out, start by asking questions of what she wants.
Yeah.
Right? What does she want to achieve in your guys' relationship, in your guys' home, where does she want to live? Again, if we're talking income goals, like what would be ideal for her? Just start having those conversations, asking those questions. What are the things that are the most important to her? What are some things that fire her up? Even ask the questions like, what are your unrealistic goals? What are some, if money weren't an option, if like
totally.
something that sounds ridiculous, so ridiculous that you don't even want to say it. Like, you don't want the words to come out of your mouth, right? Because someone might judge you. And so, and you might not agree with those things, or you might think it's silly, or you might say that and she might think smaller, or not say that big magnificent thing. And that's great. That's still a start. And if it's important to her, then you embrace that. And then you come up with a plan to push towards that. Now, in that plan, that's going to require some self-development on her part. And so you come up together. Okay, well, to achieve that, I'm going to do this and you do this, and let's help each other, and let's encourage each other, and let's inspire each other. And so you do it that way. And it no matter how silly it sounds, like my wife literally is totally happy just sitting on a lounge chair in a tropical place planning something. And I think that's ridiculous. But if we could be in a position where we go on a tropical vacation and she could just sit down and like kind of plan the next thing, she's the happiest person on the planet. Where I have to be doing something, I want to go surf all day or whatever it is. And she thinks that's ridiculous. This place we moved into, we have a big barn. I want to fill it with a bunch of classic cars and stuff. She thinks that's stupid, but she knows how excited I get about that. And she's on board with it, and she encourages it, no matter how dumb she thinks it is, or a waste or whatever else. She's still supportive of it. And so finding out what those things are for her, and then you need to drip on her. And I mentioned where most people struggle with this is that their spouse typically doesn't stop the trucks like we were talking about, and they still listen to things that discourage them. So maybe you help, for lack of a better word, distract her from that stuff, recommend things to fill that same time with for her instead of the trash. And then consistently encourage her in pushing towards whatever those goals are that she comes up with. But if you're not having that communication to begin with, then it's never going to happen. And then if you're not wrapping it around what she wants and not just what you want, which is what most people do, then that's a losing battle.
Totally. Yeah. One thing that comes to mind here is really from, what this is leadership, right? This is presiding. How do we inspire others to greatness, right? And if you're in a management position, in a leadership position, and you have reports, this is your job. You're now in the business of people. And how do you inspire your coworkers? So, so I'll just go off of that leadership training, you know what I mean? That we're kind of, to be honest with you, I'm in the process of developing for our leadership. Number one, modeling. You have to model what is high performance and what it looks like, whatever it is that you're inspiring them to be. So that way you're not a hypocrite. You're not avid of integrity. You got to model it. Number two, you have to be inspired yourself, right? I can't expect Sean to be inspired if I'm not even inspired. So he even knows what that looks like. So you have to be an inspired individual. And part of being an inspired individual is sharing from a place of passion and excitement, right? I could be inspired, and if I bottle that all up and I keep it to myself, no one knows, right? I got to be like screaming from the rooftop, like, oh man, like we're making this progress and this is what I'm doing. And this is why I'm so excited about it. So you have to communicate what's inspiring you. And then third, I think we have to be in a position that we care, because if Sean, if you don't know I care for you, then we're not aligned, right? Anything I even say or suggest to you is just from a place of trying to change me, and you don't appreciate me the way I am, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so I'd latch on to like Outward Mindset by the Harbinger Institute around how do you position your relationship into a position where you are then in an ability of authority where you can teach and correct. And that's the very last step of that relationship triangle. Way below that is establishing a strong relationship with that individual, knowing that that you actually care for them. And then the last is kind of what you alluded to, Sean, is have a unified focus. Nothing creates momentum like you and I being on the same page, knowing that we're working towards something together. And that unified focus, and so as an example, in 2 weeks, I have a brand new employee. He's flying out to Utah. He's going to join our team, and on a quarterly basis, we will do what we call critical issues. And this creates unified focus. So number one step in critical issues is, what are our current issues that are preventing us from greatness right now? Oh man, we have this, we have that, and we write them all down, right? I know what they are, right? I have my list, but I'm having that conversation. So in Kilton's, you're asking your wife, what issues do we have? What could we improve in our home? What can we improve in our family? What are some issues, right? That is preventing us from having the most amazing world and amazing lives in the world, right? Number two, what's the desired outcome? Now that's kind of that dreaming. What if? What's the possibilities? What could we do? And then break down, okay, well, what are some actions that we can take over the next 3 months to work towards this? Now you have unified focus. Now you're in a position to get aligned as a couple, right? As a team, and then proceed forward. So modeling, be inspired, have a solid relationship, and then create unified focus is kind of what my thoughts would be anyway.
Yeah. Well, what do you and Asia do? Because I've never met Asia. I've never had a conversation with her, she might be making an assumption, but she sounds like and seems like a go-getter. Like she's really pushes herself, focus, is achieving and excelling in different things that she's excited about. So like, what do you guys do? Is it the same thing like I said, where she was already like that? And so you have that advantage, or
she's already charismatic and by no means was she ever passive in life. But it's really interesting though, Sean, there's been some key areas that her and I didn't have alignment around. And I really honestly believe this. And it wasn't from a position of manipulation. It was actually from a position of just sharing myself. But by me sharing what's getting me excited, or sharing ideas and what I'm working on, whatever, has completely allowed her to have that same possibility for herself. I use this analogy all the time, and guys that aren't LDS, I'll do a quick explanation, but I had this complaint in the LDS church around people doing what we call testimony meeting wrong. And what people do, so the idea of a testimony meeting is to share what is true for you, right? Or where you have a testimony in, not to share what other people should do. And the difference is, the minute you talk to me, Sean, my brain, every human brain immediately goes, is that true? And then I start like, well, I don't know if it's true. And I start judging what you're telling me. I immediately start putting up walls to accept what you have to say. And the minute you tell your wife, like, oh, honey, you should, it's immediately going to be met with, do I agree? Do I not agree? And it's going to have conflict. But when you share a proper testimony, you can't argue, right? Like, Sean, if I come to you and say, Sean, I read this book, and what is so powerful, it really allowed me to see this different aspect of my life where I was showing up not in a very powerful way. And what's now present for me is that I'm going to do this, and I'm going to have better results in my life. You're not going to argue. Why? Because I shared what was true for me. But what's powerful of that is then you have a chance to put it on your lap and consider it for yourself without me preaching to you. And so now the key, though, we have to communicate this stuff, right? You can't, and that's where I struggle, because by default, I'm like, I'm getting after it, but no one knows I'm getting after it. I'm not communicating any of this stuff. But by me sharing what's powerful for me, what's working for me, what I'm excited about, it creates opportunity for her to look and assess for herself without me even suggesting anything that she should do. And let's be honest, in the grand scheme of things, when we look at freedom and the power of liberty, right? And really how people learn, they learn by deciding for themselves. They don't learn by being told something, right? By being preached at.
Yeah. Now, is one of you more optimistic and one of you worry more? Do you guys have that dynamic?
Without a doubt. Yeah. She's like, everything's going to be fine in this world. And I'm like, no, everything's going to fail, and we need contingency plans.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
totally.
did she do it to the point? Because this is important, because I think most relationships have this dynamic too. Does she do it to the point sometimes where it pisses you off? Where
no,
you're like,
without it. Yeah, without it, that pisses me off. Yeah.
So my wife and I are the opposite. I'm the positive and optimistic one.
Oh, really?
She's the warrior. And man, she's constantly pissed at me. Like, don't just say. She used to get pissed because my line was, it's only temporary. And she'd get so pissed off, like to the point where, like, I got my wisdom teeth pulled one time, and I'm on the couch and I'm miserable. And she's like, oh, are you okay? And I'm like, no, and she's like, it's only temporary. And she left the house. Right. Like, not, do you need anything? Are you whatever? Like,
I love it.
Just to get back at me. Right. But I had to change it to, actually, Gordon B. Hinckley is who I quote now. I say, it always works out. Right. That's one of his famous quotes. It always works out. And so now that's my new mantra, and she knows when it's coming. But here's the thing. And the reason I ask about Asia, because she probably even knows it's going to piss you off, but it's still important that she does it. That makes sense. It's still important that you have that dynamic together.
And I've learned the value of it. Because the joke is, honey, you're so positive that shit could go south, and you won't even accept it went south because you're still positive about it. So I could be completely right and say, hey, we should have had a contingency plan or what, but it doesn't matter, because even if it goes south, she's like, oh yeah, it's all great. And I'm like, what, so, but does that serve me? Oh, hell yeah, it does. Because what was her attitude when I said, hey, honey, I want to start working for myself.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. You should just do it. That's not what normal spouses probably would have said. So good times.
This last thought, I wrote it down as you were talking. This old story, and I'm not going to tell the story because I won't tell it right, but it's basically the story of these plow horses. And it's basically the fact of plow horses. Back in the day, they used to have like tractor pulls, but with horses. I think they still do that in some communities. And what they found is that a good plow horse, the best plow horse that pulls the most weight, can pull 2 to 3 times their own weight. That's the strongest of plow horses, can pull 2 to 3 times their own dead weight. Right.
Yeah.
And, but if you take 2 of the best plow horses and hitch them up together, they can pull 10 to 20 times their own weight together. And so the same is true for us as couples. that when we're focused, on the same goal together and pulling together, makes all the difference.
I like it. That's a good way to wrap it up, man.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. So a couple things just as a reminder, Iron Council opens up 2 days from now. It will be closed after the following 2 weeks for 3 months. So if you are wanting to join us, you need to act quickly. To learn more about the Iron Council, our exclusive brotherhood, go to orderofman.com/Iron Council. And as always, join Mr. Mickler on the socials at Ryan Mickler. And the last thing is Legacy. Our Legacy event is not yet sold out.
Oh.
It will. Oh, hey, there you go. You got the Legacy shirt on as well. Represent.
Chances.
So if you want to join us in Maine for Legacy, go to orderofman.com/legacy to sign up and register. We will have a full house. It will sell out. It always has. And so don't, just like everything else in life, right? Don't delay. If you are interested, execute, and then work out the details later. Other than that, I think we're solid on everything else. So until, let's see, what do we got? Friday field notes. Take action and become the men you were meant to be.